The hall was already full when the doors slowly closed. Soft lights hung from the ceiling, glowing warmly over rows of polished seats. People whispered to each other, adjusting their coats, checking their phones, and flipping through small printed programs. Everyone seemed calm, confident, and certain they belonged there. This was not the kind of place where surprises were expected. Everything followed rules, schedules, and quiet traditions. On the stage stood a grand piano, black and shining like a mirror. It rested under a single light, silent but powerful, as if it carried many stories inside it. The audience barely looked at it anymore. For them, it was normal. They had seen instruments like this many times before. To them, it was just part of the evening. Near the back of the hall, a man slipped into an empty seat. He arrived late, careful not to draw attention, yet attention followed him anyway. His clothes were clean but worn. His jacket looked older than most people in the room. His shoes had thin soles and creases from years of walking. He sat with his hands folded tightly in his lap, shoulders slightly bent, as if he was trying to make himself smaller. People around him noticed. A few glanced at him, then looked away. Others stared for a second longer than needed. He didn't look like the rest of them. He didn't carry the easy confidence of someone who often attended events like this. His eyes kept drifting toward the stage, especially the piano. Not in a casual way, but in a way that felt deep and personal. As the minutes passed, his breathing slowed. The noise of the crowd faded for him. All he could see was the piano. His fingers twitched slightly, as if they remembered something his mind was afraid to say out loud. He leaned forward, resting his elbows on his knees, his gaze fixed. For him, this was not just an instrument. It was a dream that had followed him for years. A dream he never fully touched, only imagined. He had spent countless nights listening to music through old radios, broken headphones, or borrowed phones. He had practiced silently on tables, on air, on his own knees, pretending they were keys. Music had lived in him even when life gave him nothing else. He swallowed hard and stood up. The movement caught attention. People nearby shifted uncomfortably. He stepped into the aisle, unsure, pausing once as if reconsidering. His heart beat fast. He told himself to sit back down, to stay quiet, to not cause trouble. But his feet kept moving. He walked slowly toward the side of the stage, stopping near a staff member dressed neatly in black. His voice came out low and shaky when he spoke. "Excuse me," he said. "I just wanted to ask something." The staff member looked him up and down, confused and slightly impatient. "The program is about to begin," they replied. "I know," he said quickly. "I won't take long. I just want to touch the piano. Just for a moment." The words sounded strange even to him. Touch the piano. Not play. Not perform. Just touch. The staff member frowned. "That's not allowed," they said. "Please return to your seat." The man didn't move. His hands trembled slightly at his sides. "Please," he said again, quieter this time. "I won't damage it. Promise. I just need one moment." People nearby began to notice. A few heads turned. Whispers started to ripple through the rows. Some looked annoyed. Others looked curious. A few smiled in a way that wasn't kind. Another staff member stepped closer. "Sir, this is a professional event," they said firmly. "This instrument is very valuable. You can't be here." The man nodded quickly. "I understand. I really do. I've waited years. Just 1 second. I won't even sit. I just want to feel the keys." His voice cracked on the last word. The staff exchanged looks. Their expressions hardened. "No," one said. "You need to step away now." The man stood there, frozen. His eyes flicked back to the piano, then down to the floor. His face flushed, not with anger, but with embarrassment. He felt suddenly too visible, like a child being scolded in public. A few people in the audience shook their heads. Someone whispered that he was causing a scene. Another murmured that security should handle it. The atmosphere changed, turning sharp and uncomfortable. He took a small step back. His shoulders dropped. For a moment it looked like he might say something else. but the words never came. He bowed his head slightly and turned away. As he walked back toward the side of the hall, his steps felt heavy. Each one reminded him of all the times he had been told no before. No lessons, no money, no access, no chance. He wasn't angry at the staff. He wasn't even angry at the audience. He was angry at himself for believing, even for a moment, that this could be different. He stopped near the wall, choosing not to return to his seat. He stood quietly, hands clasped, eyes still on the piano. Even from a distance it called to him. The smooth surface, the clean lines, the promise of sound. The room slowly settled again. People returned their attention to the stage. Conversations faded. The earlier tension became just another small disturbance, soon to be forgotten. But the man did not forget. He stayed still, breathing slowly, listening to the hum of the hall. In his mind, music began to play. Soft at first, then clearer. He imagined his fingers moving freely, not limited by fear or rules. In that silent space inside him, he was already playing. No one around him knew what the piano meant to him. They didn't know about the years of struggle, the long days of work that left his hands rough and tired. They didn't know about the nights when music was the only thing that kept him going. They saw only what was on the surface. As the lights dimmed slightly and the event prepared to begin, he closed his eyes for a brief moment. He told himself that at least he had seen it up close. At least he had tried. But deep inside, something refused to let go. A quiet hope remained, fragile but alive, waiting for a reason to rise. And somewhere between the silence and the first note yet to be played, his story was only beginning. The music event was supposed to begin, yet the hall felt slightly unsettled. People adjusted in their seats, but a quiet tension lingered in the air. The man stood near the wall, half hidden by shadows, trying to look invisible. His heart was still racing, not from fear now, but from the weight of disappointment pressing on his chest. He kept his eyes on the piano. Every few seconds he looked away, then looked back again, as if afraid it might disappear. His fingers slowly unclenched and clenched again. The memory of being turned away replayed in his mind. The firm voices, the stares, the feeling of being judged before being understood. He told himself he should leave. Staying would only make things worse. He didn't belong here. That was clear now. Yet his feet stayed planted. Something inside him refused to move, as if leaving would mean giving up more than just a seat in a hall. A few rows away, people whispered. Some were annoyed that the moment earlier had delayed the program. Others spoke quietly, their words softer, less harsh. One person glanced back at him again, noticing how still he stood, how carefully he kept his hands folded, how his eyes never wandered from the stage. From the staff side, there was concern too. They worried about order, about rules, about keeping everything professional. Expensive instruments were not meant to be touched by strangers. That was the rule, and rules existed for a reason. Still, one staff member felt uneasy. The man had not acted angry or rude. He had not raised his voice. He had simply asked. The lights dimmed slightly more, signaling that the performance would begin soon. A performer was expected to come on stage, but there was a small delay. The piano remained alone under the spotlight. The man near the wall took a slow breath. He remembered other moments like this in his life. Standing outside places he could not enter. Watching opportunities pass by. Learning to accept silence instead of sound. He had learned early how to hide his disappointment. How to smile politely when dreams were not meant for people like him. He looked down at his hands. They were rough, marked by years of work. Small scars crossed his fingers. These hands had lifted heavy objects, fixed broken things, and survived long days. Yet inside them lived something gentle. Music had shaped them in ways no one could see. A quiet cough came from somewhere in the audience. Someone cleared their throat, then spoke softly to the person next to them. "He doesn't look dangerous," they said. "He just looks hopeful." Another person nodded slowly. "He didn't even ask to play," they replied. "Just to touch it." Those words lingered. The staff near the stage exchanged brief glances. One of them sighed. They had seen troublemakers before. This man was not one of them. Still, they hesitated. If they allowed him, others might follow. Control could be lost. The man sensed movement and looked up. For a moment, he thought someone was coming to ask him to leave completely. His stomach tightened. He prepared himself to walk out quietly, without argument. Instead, a staff member stopped a few steps away. Their voice was lower now, less sharp. "Sir," they said, "can you tell me why this is so important to you?" The man blinked, surprised. He swallowed. Words were not easy for him, especially in moments like this. "I don't have lessons," he said slowly. "I never did. I never owned a piano. But music stayed with me. Always." He paused, choosing his words carefully. "I used to imagine the keys," he continued, "on tables, on boxes, anywhere. I practiced in my head. I just wanted to know what it feels like. For real." The staff member listened, arms crossed, expression unreadable. Around them, a few audience members leaned forward, pretending not to listen while clearly listening. The man added quietly, "I won't be upset if you say no. I already understand that word." Something shifted. Not loudly, not suddenly, but enough to be felt. Another staff member joined them. They spoke briefly in low voices. The rules were repeated. The risks were mentioned. But so was the mood of the room. The delay. The growing attention. The fact that refusing him again might leave a heavier feeling than allowing him for just a moment. The man waited, heart pounding. He kept his eyes lowered, afraid that hope might show too clearly on his face. After what felt like a long time, one of them spoke. "We can't let you play," they said carefully. The man nodded, already accepting the familiar ending. "But," the voice continued, "you may step up for 1 minute. You may touch the keys. Nothing more." The man looked up slowly. "1 minute?" he repeated, unsure if he had heard correctly. "1 minute," the staff member confirmed. "And only under supervision." A soft wave of reaction passed through the hall. Some people leaned back, curious. Others looked skeptical. A few smiled, sensing something unexpected was about to happen. The man's eyes filled, but he quickly blinked the feeling away. "Thank you," he said, his voice barely steady. He didn't smile widely. He didn't celebrate. He simply breathed, as if he had been holding air in his lungs for years. He took careful steps toward the stage. Each one felt unreal. The distance between him and the piano had once felt impossible. Now it closed slowly, one step at a time. As he reached the edge of the stage, he paused. He removed his jacket gently and folded it over his arm, as if entering a sacred place. He climbed the steps with quiet respect. The piano loomed before him, larger than he imagined. The surface reflected his face back at him. He hesitated, lifting his hands slightly above the keys, not touching yet. He closed his eyes for a brief second. The hall fell completely silent. He lowered his fingers toward the piano, unaware that the moment everyone thought was small was about to become something much more. And in that stillness, with 1 minute granted and a lifetime behind him, the story moved toward a turning point no one expected. The man stood before the piano, hands hovering just above the keys. The single light above the stage made the surface shine, reflecting his fingers, his face, and the quiet fear in his eyes. The room was so silent that even small movements felt loud. No one spoke. No one moved. It was as if the entire hall was holding its breath. He reminded himself of the rule. 1 minute. Only one. No playing. Just touching. He had promised. He respected that promise. Still, his hands trembled. Not from weakness, but from emotion. This was closer than he had ever been. He lowered his right hand first. His fingertips brushed the smooth keys lightly, almost unsure if they were real. The cool surface sent a small shiver through him. He pressed down gently, not enough to make a sound. Then he touched another key, and another, slowly, carefully, as if greeting something long lost. A staff member watched closely from the side. They were ready to step in if needed. But the man did nothing wrong. He wasn't careless. He wasn't wild. He treated the piano with a respect that surprised everyone. The audience leaned forward. Some expected nothing to happen. Others felt a strange curiosity grow. Why did touching keys matter this much to him? What kind of life leads someone to beg for a moment like this? The man's breathing began to slow. The nerves faded, replaced by a quiet focus. His fingers rested on the keys now, more confident, more certain. He remembered all the silent practice, all the nights imagining sound without ever hearing it from his own hands. Without thinking, he pressed a key. The note was soft, almost fragile, but it echoed clearly through the hall. A sharp inhale moved through the audience. The sound hung in the air longer than expected. Felt heavier than a single note should feel. The man froze. He had broken the rule. He looked quickly toward the staff, ready to step away, to apologize, to leave. But no one stopped him. No one spoke. The staff member hesitated, confused by their own reaction. The sound had not felt like a mistake. Felt intentional, careful, honest. The man's eyes filled with fear and wonder at the same time. He whispered, barely audible, "I'm sorry." Still no one moved. His fingers remained on the keys. The 1 minute had not been counted out loud. Time felt different now. Slower, thicker. He pressed another key. Then another. Slowly, gently. The notes were simple, uneven, but full of feeling. He was not performing. He was remembering. The piano responded to him in a way he never expected. The sound wrapped around the room, warm and real. Each note carried something unseen. Years of silence. Years of hope. People exchanged glances. This was not noise. This was not disrespect. This was something else entirely. The staff member took a step forward, then stopped. Another staff member shook their head slightly, as if saying, "Let it be." The man's posture changed. His shoulders relaxed. His fingers moved more freely now, guided by instinct rather than thought. The music was not fast. It was not complex, but it was alive. In the audience, someone felt their throat tighten. Another wiped their eyes, surprised by their own reaction. They had expected talent to look polished, confident, rehearsed. This was raw. This was human. The man forgot where he was. He forgot the crowd. He forgot the rules. In that moment, it was just him and the piano finally meeting after a lifetime of distance. He played as if telling a story without words. A story of long days and quiet nights. Of listening from far away. Of dreaming without permission. The notes rose and fell like breath. Uneven but sincere. The hall felt different now. The air itself seemed to change. No one checked their phone. No one whispered. Every ear was tuned to the sound coming from those worn hands. A few people realized something uncomfortable. They had judged him the moment they saw him. His clothes, his posture, his hesitation. They had decided his place before hearing his story. The piano continued to sing under his touch. The sound was not perfect, but it was honest. And honesty in that moment mattered more than perfection. Somewhere near the back, someone smiled softly. Near the front, someone sat frozen, eyes wide. The music connected people who had nothing else in common. The man's hands moved with growing confidence. His fingers found patterns, simple melodies shaped by memory rather than training. He was not copying anything he had heard before. He was letting years of quiet listening finally speak. A staff member glanced at the time, then at the crowd. The 1 minute was long gone, but stopping him now felt wrong, like cutting off a sentence before it was finished. The man leaned slightly closer to the piano, as if listening to it answer him. His face showed a mix of peace and disbelief. This was real. He was here. He was playing. The audience no longer saw a stranger. They saw a person finally allowed to be himself. The music softened. His fingers slowed. He returned to the quiet notes he started with. Each sound felt like a goodbye, gentle and thankful. As the final note faded, the silence returned. But it was not the same silence as before. It was full, heavy, respectful. The man lifted his hands from the keys and let them rest in his lap. He did not look at the audience. He did not wait for a reaction. He simply sat there, breathing, as if afraid the moment might disappear if he moved. No one spoke. For a few heartbeats the world seemed paused. And in that pause, everyone understood that something rare had just happened. The man slowly stood, preparing to step away, unaware that the simple act of touching the piano had already changed everything. The silence after the final note felt deeper than any sound that had come before it. The man stood slowly, his legs unsteady, as if he had just woken from a long dream. His hands hovered near his sides, unsure where to rest. He took one small step back from the piano, ready to leave the stage before anyone asked him to. Then someone clapped. It was a single sound at first, sharp and unexpected. It came from somewhere in the middle rows. The man froze, thinking he might be mistaken. A second clap followed, then a third. The sound spread like ripples across still water. Within seconds, the hall filled with applause. The man turned slightly, eyes wide. He did not smile right away. He searched faces, confused, almost frightened, as if the reaction might disappear if he believed it too quickly. People were standing now, not all at once but one by one. Chairs shifted. Hands came together again and again. The applause was not loud at first. It grew slowly, like people were unsure how to respond to something they had not planned for. But it kept growing. Soon it filled the room. The man lowered his head, overwhelmed. He felt heat rise to his face. His chest tightened. He pressed his lips together, trying to hold himself together. He had not played for praise. He had not played to be seen. He had played because he could not hold it inside any longer. A staff member approached carefully, unsure what to say. The rules, the schedule, the plan for the evening, all of it had slipped out of reach. They looked at the man, then at the audience, then back at the man. "Thank you," the staff member said quietly. It was not a command. It was not a warning. It sounded more like gratitude. The man nodded, still not trusting his voice. He stepped away from the piano and began to walk toward the edge of the stage. His steps were slow, as if gravity had changed. As he reached the stairs, someone in the front row spoke out loud. "Please," they said, "let him finish." The words surprised everyone, including the speaker. They had not planned to say it. It had simply slipped out. Another voice followed. "Yes, please." The staff hesitated. The man stopped walking. He turned back, unsure if the words were meant for him. The applause softened but did not stop. It changed into something gentler, encouraging. The man looked at the piano again. For a moment, doubt returned. He had already crossed a line once. He did not want to cause trouble. He did not want to ruin the evening. He lifted his hands slightly, a silent question. The staff member nodded. He returned to the bench, this time sitting more comfortably, as if the piano had invited him back. He rested his hands on the keys and took a deep breath. This time, the music came differently. He played with more confidence, not because he felt skilled, but because he felt accepted. The notes flowed more freely now. The melody grew stronger, fuller. It still wasn't perfect, but it didn't need to be. The music carried warmth, memory, and quiet strength. People listened in a way they hadn't before. Not as judges, not as critics, but as witnesses. The man leaned into the sound, letting it guide him. He played about mornings filled with tired hope, about nights where silence felt heavy, about dreams that waited patiently. The piano answered him with depth and color. The sound filled the corners of the hall, reaching even those who had tried not to care earlier. Faces softened, shoulders relaxed. The room felt smaller, closer. Someone near the aisle wiped their eyes and laughed quietly at themselves. Someone else sat completely still, hands folded, heart racing. The man's fingers moved with steady purpose now. He was no longer asking permission. He was sharing. When the music finally slowed and came to a gentle close, the last note lingered, then faded naturally. This time, the silence that followed was warm. Then the applause returned, louder and more certain than before. People stood again, this time together. The sound of clapping filled the hall, mixed with soft cheers and words of thanks. The man stood slowly, overwhelmed once more. He bowed his head, then looked up, meeting eyes across the room. He saw respect there, curiosity, even regret. The staff members exchanged looks. One of them stepped forward and spoke to the audience. "We will take a short pause," they said. "Thank you for your patience." The man was guided gently off the stage, not as a problem, but as a guest. Behind the curtain, the noise of the hall softened. Someone offered him water. Another asked him to sit. He nodded, still trying to understand what had just happened. His hands shook slightly now that the moment had passed. A staff member spoke carefully. "Where did you learn to play like that?" The man smiled faintly. "I didn't," he said. "I just listened." The staff member nodded slowly, unsure what else to say. Outside the curtain, people talked quietly among themselves. The mood had changed. What was meant to be a simple event had turned into something personal, something shared. The man sat alone for a moment, breathing deeply. He felt lighter than he had in years, yet strangely tired, like someone who had finally set down a heavy bag they had been carrying for too long. He did not know what would happen next. He did not expect anything more. For him, the gift had already been given. And as the audience waited, and the piano rested in silence once more, everyone knew that the evening would be remembered for reasons no one had planned. The hall slowly returned to a softer noise after the applause faded. People sat back down, still processing what they had just witnessed. Conversations were quieter now, more thoughtful. The piano rested under the light again, but it no longer felt like just an object on a stage. It felt like a bridge that had connected strangers for a few honest moments. Behind the curtain, the man sat with a paper cup of water in his hands. He took small sips, steadying his breath. His heart still beat fast, but not with fear anymore. It was something else now. Relief, maybe, or gratitude. He did not expect anything more from the night. What had already happened felt bigger than anything he had imagined. A staff member returned and sat a short distance away, not crowding him. "You did something special out there," they said quietly. The man shook his head slightly. "I just played what I felt," he replied. "That's all I know how to do." The staff member nodded. There was no argument to make against that. When the curtain opened again, the official program resumed, but it felt different. The audience listened politely, yet their minds wandered back to the unexpected moment. Even the planned performances felt softer, as if everyone had agreed, without speaking, to treat the music more gently. The man did not return to his seat. Instead, he stood near the back, as he had before, quietly observing. No one asked him to leave. A few people glanced back at him now and smiled. One person gave him a small nod of respect. He returned it awkwardly, not used to being noticed in that way. As the evening came to an end, people slowly made their way toward the exits. Coats were pulled on. Bags were gathered. The sound of footsteps echoed through the hall. The man waited until most people had left. He did not want attention. He simply wanted one last look. He walked toward the stage again, stopping at a respectful distance this time. The lights were dimmer now. The piano looked calm, almost resting after a long conversation. He stood there for a moment, hands at his sides, then turned to leave. "Sir," a voice called out. He turned back, surprised. A person from the audience approached him, holding a small notebook. "I just wanted to say thank you," they said. "I came here thinking music was something only certain people could understand. Tonight changed that." The man smiled softly. "Music belongs to everyone," he replied. They nodded, clearly moved, then walked away. Outside the hall, the night air felt cool and fresh. The man stepped onto the sidewalk and looked up at the sky. The city lights glowed around him, familiar and ordinary. Life had not suddenly changed. He still had the same worries waiting for him tomorrow, the same routine, the same challenges. But something inside him was lighter. As he walked, he thought about all the years he had carried his love for music quietly, afraid it would never be heard. He thought about how close he had come to leaving without asking that night, how easily the moment could have been missed. He realized something important then. It wasn't about being allowed on a stage. It wasn't about applause. It was about choosing not to silence himself anymore. In the days that followed, the story spread quietly. Not in headlines or loud announcements, but in conversations. People talked about the night they saw something real. Some searched for him, curious to know more. Others simply carried the memory with them. The man returned to his life as usual. He worked. He walked. He listened to music on old headphones. But now, when he imagined the piano, he no longer felt distance. He felt connection. One afternoon, he passed a small community center and heard music coming from inside. A simple piano sat near the window. The sound drifted into the street. He stopped. For a moment, doubt returned. Old habits whispered that he should keep walking, that he didn't belong. Then he remembered the hall, the silence, the single note. He stepped inside. The person there looked up and smiled. "Would you like to try?" they asked casually. The man hesitated, then nodded. This time he did not beg. He sat at the piano and placed his hands on the keys. The sound that followed was not meant to impress anyone. It was meant to be true. And it was. The story does not end with fame or fortune. It ends with something quieter and stronger. A reminder that talent does not always arrive polished. That dreams often survive in silence. And that sometimes, all it takes is one moment of courage for something beautiful to finally be heard. The man walked home that evening with tired legs and a full heart. The city noise surrounded him again, but it no longer drowned out the music inside. He knew now that the piano was not just an instrument on a stage. It was a door, and he had finally stepped through it.